late April 2020, my wife decides, well, we need to do something in the evenings. Obviously, with COVID, people weren't going out, and she was looking for things to do, things to entertain us. And she found a Groupon for a fellow who was hosting a virtual Dublin pub crawl via Zoom for Irish whiskeys. She asked me if I thought that that might be something fun that we could try, given what I was doing with my Whistle Pig 15, that I was doing my exploration of flavors, exploring the rest of the Whistle Pig range. And I said, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and do it. I mean, why not? And at the same time, we get to help this guy out by helping him make a living during a very difficult time. So the evening of the event, or at least prior to the evening of the event, I run out to Total Wine and I go to pick up a couple of minis of Irish whiskeys. Now, the reason why I got minis is I was not really a fan of Irish whiskey. My exposure to Irish whiskey at the time had been, back in my youth, let's say the party days, in which you would either be doing shots of Jameson's or Bushmill or Tullamore Dew, and then you would either mix it in a solo cup with some type of soda, etc. This was all just about catching the buzz and having a good time. It wasn't really about appreciating the flavor profile of a particular whiskey. So I went and I grabbed the Jamesons, the Tullamore Dew, Bushmills, etc. They also had Kilburn and they also had Wolfhound. I'd never heard of those other two brands before, but I figured, okay, I can sip through these during this event. So the evening of the event, the fellow comes on and he's actually talking about whiskeys I've never heard of before. He's talking about Powers. He's talking about Powers, the gold label. He's talking about Three Swallows. He's talking about Powers, John's Lane. He's talking about Redbreast. He talks about Redbreast 12. He talks about the cask strength, the Lustau, etc. He talks about the spot products, yellow spot, green spot, red spot, blue spot. And he talks about Teeling, how Teeling had just opened or reopened a distilling facility in Dublin after a long rest. He also talks about Rowan Company. Again, he mentions Jameson's. He talks about Jameson's Black Barrel. He talks about aged Bushmill products. I wasn't aware of the aged Bushmill products. And my point in this is what he was talking about in his version of Irish whiskey was very different from what I thought I knew. Similar to my earlier video on exploring ryes, I had certain preconceptions of what I thought Irish whiskey was, and instead I was introduced into something completely different. He was particularly fond of the the single pot still Irish whiskeys that are triple distilled. Each of these expressions in front of me are all single pot still Irish whiskeys that have been triple distilled. Now, there's a couple of variations between them, right? So this guy is at 40% ABV, whereas these others are all 46, which means 92 proof, right? In each of them, interestingly enough, they are 50% malted barley, 50% unmalted barley. For those of you that are curious, what does the malted barley mean? So the malting of the barley or the malting of that particular grain means that you steep it in water to allow the grain, the seed, to start to germinate, to start to develop. And the idea behind that is as it starts to do its germination, it breaks down the cellular walls and allows the starches to become more exposed, so that when you mash it and you crush it, that you can then allow the yeast to get at those starches more readily. It allows for easier fermentation. The difference between the two is if you try to bite an unmalted barley corn, you're probably going to crack a tooth, whereas the malted barley corn will give you that sweetness as it crushes in your teeth. They all have different aging styles as well. These guys do bourbon and sherry, but they actually put it to sleep for 12 years. A number of those years, I believe it's somewhere around 2 years, etc., are mostly in the sherry casks with a blend of the bourbon. These guys also do sherry and bourbon casks. However, they use a smaller amount of the sherry casks. These guys also use the bourbon and the sherry casks. However, this particular expression does a finish in ex-French oak Zinfandel casks. Teeling does something a little bit different. They use both the sherry and the ex-bourbon casks, so they also use new virgin American oak in their process. This is aged 12 years. This is aged 12 years. This is rumored to be aged somewhere between 5 and 7. This is the youngest whiskeys. This I was unable to find an actual age statement on, but minimally by law, Irish law for single pot still labeling, it has to at least be 3 years. I'm going to guess this is probably somewhere between 5 and 9. Those of you who might know, please add it in the comment section down below. Another fun fact. These three guys are actually made in the same distillery. Middleton is a massive and technically complex operation. It has a number of different washbacks and stills, etc. They actually have 3 different still setups for their triple distillation, the single pot still. And those different styles include, for example, an onion style single pot still, the lantern style pot still. My personal favorite is actually this one. I find that this one has the flavor profile that I like the most, the Powers John's Lane. And I think part of that is this is mostly the bourbon cask, so it tends to give me those flavors that I enjoy from a nice bourbon, but with the triple distillation. Now, what does the triple distillation mean? So what it means is that, let's say, those characteristics, those parts of the whiskey that sometimes lend those notes that are harsher, let's say what they call the faints, so both the head faints as well as the tail faints. These are the parts that first come off the distillate. They have sometimes some flavors that folks don't like, and in the case of the heads, sometimes also contains methanol, which is actually toxic for you. So that gets cut off, and they tend to take the part after that. And before you get to the end of the distillate, which might contain products that have, let's say, been, for lack of a better term, overcooked, those also get cut off. Then they do that again for a second time as well as a third time. And what it does is it basically takes the rough edges, the elbows, takes the elbows off the whiskey and allows a deeper, richer, more oily, more complex expression. This guy I mentioned is chill filtered. These guys are non-chill filtered. So I think the flavor profile of these is more complex, more attuned to my particular palate. However, if you're new to Irish whiskey, one of the most easily and readily accessible ways to approach Irish whiskeys is through the Redbreast 12. Now, the reason why I say that it's lower proof, it is complex but in very subtle manner. The flavors that it imparts, let's say the flavors from the sherry, the sweetness, the berry, the tannic notes from the oak, etc., the vanilla, the creaminess from the ex-bourbon cask, as well as the creaminess from the single pot still process, are all in here without it being an offensive whiskey. You can sip this neat and you will enjoy this readily. One of these days we're also going to talk about some of the other expressions of Irish whiskey, as I mentioned, such as the Black Barrel, as well as the Redbreast cask strength, the green apple notes that you get in the normal regular green spot. This has those green apple notes, but it also has notes of, let's say, I'm going to call it, it pulls towards cassis or some type of pomegranate. It's a sharper, more acidic red berry type flavor on these, and I think that's from the Zinfandel. This one is actually a very complex, heavy, longer mouthfeel on the teeling. I think it's actually quite lovely, especially for what I believe is a younger whiskey. So when you are moving into the world of whiskey, one of the things that you might find is similar to myself, and I'm not saying that this is everyone, but at least for myself, I had certain preconceptions. It's a similar theme that I shared in my earlier Whistle Pig rye whiskey video. I thought I understood what whiskeys were, or what Irish whiskeys were, and it turns out that actually there's a whole world of Irish whiskey that I wasn't aware of and that I really enjoyed. I like the complexity that the single pot still and that triple distillation process gives to the whiskey. It tends to be a very nice, soft, easy drinking type of whiskey with these complex flavors that are actually quite subtle. They don't punch you in the mouth. They're much more subtle. You can kind of pick them out the longer you sip them. These are sipping whiskeys, though you can have them in a cocktail. You can serve them over ice. I find the Redbreast, though, when you pour it over the ice, at least at the 12-year expression, you tend to lose a lot of the wonderful characteristics that are in this whiskey. These guys hold up a little bit better. This is probably the more interesting one because this one is actually made in a different house and they have a different style altogether. I hope you enjoyed this video, and obviously if there's anything you need to correct or anything that you think you would like to add additional comments to, or you'd like to tell me about your exposure, expressions, experience with Irish whiskeys, please add them in the comment field and give me a thumbs up. to keep this going on that algorithm. Cheers. Be well.